Senate Armed Services Committee is ready to get to work on its markup for the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. One of the controversial provisions in the House version would cut a quarter of the money the department spends on 28 organizations inside DoD, including eliminating 7 of them by 2021. Peter Levine is Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Defense Analyses, former Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness at DoD. Thanks very much for joining me. These are referred to as Fourth Estate organizations that Chairman Thornberry wants to downsize. What exactly do they do, Peter?
So the Fourth Estate is generally defined as that part of the Department of Defense which is not part of the 3 military services. That's why it's the Fourth Estate. It's the fourth part after the 3 military services. And people tend to think of the Fourth Estate as being overhead, but it really performs a lot of important missions. And to start with, you've got the Joint Staff and the combatant commands there. So right there you've got a military mission. You've got the Missile Defense Agency, Special Operations Command. You've got some really crucial combatant commands in there. You've got the entire defense intelligence community in there. That takes up, those things that I just described take up most of the budget of the Fourth Estate. So what people focus on is not that, because they don't want to cut that. They see that as being military. They focus on the business side of the Fourth Estate. So there are a handful of small agencies. There are a large number of small agencies, but there are just a handful of large ones in that business part. Largely, the ones people focus on most are the Defense Logistics Agency, the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, that's DLA and DFAS, and DISA, the Defense Information Services Agency. So those would generally be the big 3. But there are other functions in the Fourth Estate as well. There's the entire healthcare program for the Department of Defense. You get the whole healthcare budget counts as a Fourth Estate. And the defense schools are part of the Fourth Estate. So there are all these other functions that are built in there. And one of the problems that you see when you see a 25% cut to the Fourth Estate is once you've eliminated all these things you don't want to cut, you actually don't necessarily have 25% of the budget left. So if you want to take a 25% cut, you have to eliminate everything that's left. There is certainly waste within the Fourth Estate. There is certainly inefficiency and mismanagement anywhere you look at Department of Defense. There's a target-rich environment, but it's hard work. And in order to get after that, you have to really understand what these agencies do and why they're doing it, and figure out how they can do it better, not just think you can eliminate them and save money that way.
So it strikes me then that this potentially is more a responsibility for your successor, Jay Gibson, as the Chief Management Officer, formerly DCMO, now CMO, than it is for budget people. It's a management issue as much as a budget issue, it sounds like.
It is absolutely a management issue. Now, the way the Department of Defense works, they're going to have to get budget help in order to address management issues. So I'm not necessarily averse to the idea that you set a budget target, as long as it's a reasonable target for what you want to achieve in terms of efficiencies in the Fourth Estate. But when you go out to achieve those efficiencies, you're going to need somebody like Jay Gibson to actually dig in and do the hard work of figuring out what can be done differently, what can be dispensed with, and what can't. And that is something that is a project of several years. It's not something you do overnight.
Is there a risk that setting that budget number and saying go do this could even that could be too prescriptive to get the kind of results that the chairman wants?
If you set it too low, it is problematic because it becomes a wedge in the budget. If you set it too low, too much, you anticipate more savings than you can achieve, then you have to. You're locked into that budget. You have to achieve the savings in some other way. You end up cutting essential operations, and you cut things that you can't afford to cut. You end up with things like the security clearance backlog that we have, backlog in audits that we have. You end up with those backlogs because you cut more than you can afford. On the other hand, as I said, I'm not averse to setting a target up front because the department has an endless ability to justify everything it's doing. So if you want to go into different offices in the department and say, you're going to have to find me the low-hanging fruit, find me the things that are the lowest priorities, you have to have some kind of club. And that target that they set, if they set it right, is an appropriate club.
Where do all of these Fourth Estate functions live? And the reason that I ask for that is we have talked in this program on a number of occasions about all the restructuring that's going on within the Department of the Office, or excuse me, within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. The restructuring of your former job, the restructuring of the CIO's job, and it just strikes me there's an awful lot of restructuring and reform going on, and I wonder at what point they start to overlap and you're not really sure that you're getting the results that you wanted because there are just too many moving parts?
I think you have to worry about too many things going on at the same time in the management area, and whether you can, for example, the current administration, as it looks for new savings, will have to continue to execute the savings programs that we initiated, because if they lose those savings, then they're going backwards. So there's always a problem with too much to do. The fourth estate, the defense agencies that we're talking about, each one reports to an undersecretary of defense or equivalent, and depending on the area that they're in. So a defense security cooperation agency might report to undersecretary for policy, or the POW MIA agency to the undersecretary for policy, defense logistics agency to, it used to be acquisition technology and logistics, now acquisition and support. Each one would have a home depending on the substantive kind of requirement of what it does. DISA would report up to the CIO, so just depending on what kind of work they're doing. There's been some discussion of rearranging that so the defense agencies would report to the CMO, to the Chief Management Officer. As a former DCMO, which was what the title was then, I'm not a fan of that idea. I think I see the attractiveness of it, but I think that the agencies that people are most concerned about managing, the large management agencies, the large business agencies I described, are already handled by business managers who are really very good business managers if you're looking at DLA or DFAS or DISA. And having really good business managers a report directed to somebody who's another manager, another layer of management, isn't necessarily helpful. And from my point of view, at least, I think one of the advantages the CMO has against other senior officials of the department is that he doesn't have an overwhelming list of day-to-day responsibilities and crises to take his time away, so he can devote his attention to the broad management issues that the department needs somebody to focus on. If you put the CMO directly in the management chain for all these defense agencies, I'm afraid that he might be overwhelmed by that responsibility and then not have time to address the broader management issues that somebody in the department needs to be responsible for.
Peter Levine, thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.